The crimson sunset bled across the horizon as Madeline Norwood wiped down the scratched oak bar top for the 100th time that day, her practiced smile masking the terror that had chased her for 300 miles across the unforgiving frontier. In Sweetwater Springs, Wyoming Territory, 1875, she was known as Sarah Miller, a widow seeking honest work, but the truth of her past remained locked behind her emerald eyes, along with the real name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in nearly a year. "Another whiskey, Miss Sarah," drawled a gruff voice from the end of the bar. Madeline nodded, maintaining her facade as she poured the amber liquid. The Silver Dollar Saloon hummed with the usual evening crowd, card players cursing their luck, piano notes competing with drunken laughter, and the occasional sound of spurs against wooden floorboards. This was her sanctuary, hidden in plain sight. "Obliged," the man said, sliding his coins across the counter. Sweetwater Springs had welcomed Sarah Miller without question when she arrived last winter, half frozen and desperate. Old Man Jenkins, the Silver Dollar's owner, had seen something in her eyes, perhaps recognizing a fellow soul acquainted with hardship, and offered her work. The patrons respected her cool efficiency and the way she deflected unwanted advances without causing offense. They accepted her story about a deceased husband and a desire for a fresh start, if only they knew the truth. "Miss Sarah," called out Martha, one of the girls who worked upstairs. "Mr. Jenkins wants to know if we need more whiskey from the storeroom." "We're fine until morning," Madeline replied, her voice carrying the slight Eastern accent she'd tried to temper over the months. The saloon doors swung open, bringing with them a gust of cool evening air and 3 trail-worn cowboys. Madeline assessed them with a quick glance, a habit born of necessity. 2 were locals who worked at the Carson Ranch. The third was a stranger, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a dust-covered hat. Something about the way he moved, confident yet alert, sent a chill down her spine. Madeline kept her head down, focusing on her work while keeping the newcomer in her peripheral vision. The 3 men settled at a table in the corner, ordering whiskey and food. As the evening progressed, Madeline relaxed slightly. The stranger seemed preoccupied with his companions, showing no interest in her. Perhaps her instincts had been wrong this time. "Perhaps he wasn't Miss Sarah," called old Jenkins from across the room. "Bring these gentlemen another round." Madeline gathered 3 glasses and the bottle, moving with practiced grace between the tables. As she approached the cowboy's table, she kept her gaze lowered, setting down each glass with careful precision. "Appreciate it, madam," said one of the Carson Ranch hands. She nodded politely, turning to leave when the stranger's voice froze her in place. "Thank you kindly, Madeline." Time seemed to stop. The saloon's cacophony faded to a distant hum as her real name echoed in her ears. Madeline's fingers tightened around the whiskey bottle, her knuckles turning white. She forced herself to look at him. The stranger had pushed back his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes and a face weathered by sun and wind. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in those eyes, recognition, certainly, but not the malice she'd expected from someone who knew her true identity. "I believe you have me confused with someone else," she managed, her voice steady despite the fear constricting her chest. "My name is Sarah Miller." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. "My mistake," he said, though his eyes told a different story. Madeline retreated to the bar, her mind racing. Who was this man? How did he know her? And most importantly, was he connected to Edward Blackstone, the man she'd fled from in Boston? Throughout the evening, she felt the stranger's gaze following her. Each time she glanced in his direction, those blue eyes were watching, patient and calculating. When the saloon began to empty as midnight approached, Madeline slipped into the back room, untying her apron with trembling hands. "Mr. Jenkins," she said when the owner entered. "I'm feeling unwell. Would you mind if I retired early tonight?" The old man's face creased with concern. "Course not, Sarah. You work harder than anyone. Get some rest." "Thank you." She gathered her shawl, planning to exit through the back door that led to the alley and then to her small room above the dressmaker's shop. The night air was crisp against her flushed skin as she hurried down the alley. The streets of Sweetwater Springs were mostly deserted at this hour, with only a few lamps casting pools of golden light on the dusty road. Madeline kept to the shadows, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was halfway to her lodgings when she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could run, a hand caught her elbow, gentle but firm. "Madeline, wait." She whirled around, coming face to face with the blue-eyed stranger. Up close in the silver moonlight, there was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. "Let go of me," she demanded, reaching for the small knife hidden in her pocket. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "My name is Nathan Vaughn." The name meant nothing to her. "How do you know who I am?" His expression softened. "Your father sent me." Of all the things he might have said, this was perhaps the most unexpected. Madeline stared at him, suspicion and a fragile hope warring within her. "My father is dead," she said flatly. "He died when I was 16. Nathan shook his head. "That's what Edward Blackstone wanted you to believe. Your father is very much alive, and he's been searching for you since you disappeared from Boston." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Madeline backed away until she felt the rough wall of a building behind her. "That's impossible. I saw his obituary in the paper. I attended his funeral." "Blackstone orchestrated all of it," Nathan explained, keeping his distance now, respecting her need for space. "He wanted control of your father's shipping company. When Michael Norwood discovered Blackstone's embezzlement, Blackstone tried to have him killed. Your father survived but remained in hiding, gathering evidence while Blackstone convinced everyone, including you, that he was dead." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan reached slowly into his coat pocket and withdrew a small object that gleamed in the moonlight. He held it out to her. "He said you would recognize this." With trembling fingers, Madeline took the item, a silver locket engraved with delicate vines. Inside was a miniature portrait of her mother, painted the year before she died. Madeline had believed this locket lost forever, along with everything else from her previous life. "Where did you get this?" she asked, clutching the precious memento. "From Michael Norwood himself. I've been working for him for the past year, tracking Blackstone's operations." Nathan's voice grew softer. "When your father learned that Blackstone was forcing you into marriage, he was desperate to reach you, but by the time I arrived in Boston, you had vanished." Tears welled in Madeline's eyes as memories flooded back her father's alleged death, her cousin Edward Blackstone's seemingly kind offer to become her guardian, and then the gradual revelation of his true nature. She had fled the night before their arranged wedding, taking only what she could carry and enough money to get her far away from Boston. "How did you find me?" she asked, wiping away a tear with the back of her hand. "It wasn't easy," Nathan admitted. "I've been following your trail for months. A stagecoach driver in Missouri remembered a young woman matching your description. Then a shopkeeper in Cheyenne recalled selling supplies to someone who paid with an Eastern banknote. Small clues led me here. And my father, where is he now?" "Safe in Chicago. Blackstone's been indicted. His financial crimes have been exposed, and there's a warrant for his arrest." Nathan took a step closer. "It's over, Madeline. You can go home." The realization that she was finally safe, that her father was alive, was overwhelming. Madeline's legs buckled beneath her, and Nathan moved swiftly to catch her, strong arms enfolding her as she collapsed against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "You're safe now." For the first time in nearly a year, Madeline allowed herself to believe it might be true. Dawn broke over Sweetwater Springs, painting the sky in delicate shades of pink and gold. Madeline sat across from Nathan in the small cafe adjacent to the general store, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. After their encounter the previous night, she had invited him to meet her here, a public place where they could talk without arousing suspicion. "Tell me everything," she said quietly. "From the beginning." Nathan's eyes, bluer in the morning light, met her steadily. "Your father and Edward Blackstone were partners in Norwood Shipping for years. About 18 months ago, your father discovered discrepancies in the company ledgers. Blackstone had been siphoning funds, making risky investments on the side that had gone badly. When confronted, he arranged an accident for your father. The carriage accident, Madeline murmured. Nathan nodded. Your father was severely injured but survived. A trusted friend doctor, Willis, helped conceal his survival while he recovered. By then, Blackstone had taken control of the company and positioned himself as your guardian. Your father was too weak to fight back immediately, and he feared that any attempt to contact you would put you in danger. So he let me believe he was dead, Madeline said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. He's never forgiven himself for that, Nathan replied softly. But he was gathering evidence, building a case against Blackstone. When he learned of the marriage plans, he knew he had to act. That's when he hired me. And what exactly is your profession, Mr. Vaughn? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Officially, I work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, but I've spent most of my life on the frontier. I know how to track people who don't want to be found. Madeline studied him, noting the calluses on his hands and the way he continuously scanned their surroundings, a man accustomed to watching for danger. How long have you been in Sweetwater Springs? She asked. 3 days. I arrived on the eastbound stage, asked a few careful questions, and heard about the new barmaid at the Silver Dollar. His expression softened. I wasn't certain it was you until I saw you last night. You took a risk, saying my name aloud. I needed to see your reaction. If I was wrong, you would have been confused, not terrified. Madeline couldn't argue with his logic. What happens now? That depends on you. Your father wants you to come home to Boston. The business is recovering, and with Blackstone facing prosecution, you'd be safe there. The thought of returning to Boston stirred complicated emotions. It had never truly felt like home after her mother died, and now it was entangled with memories of fear and betrayal. And if I don't want to go back? She asked, surprising herself with the question. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Then I deliver a letter from your father and leave you to live your life however you choose. You're free, Madeline. That's what all this was for. Freedom. Such a simple word for something she'd risked everything to obtain. Madeline gazed out the window at the dusty main street of Sweetwater Springs. This small frontier town had been a hiding place, not a home, yet the thought of returning to Boston filled her with unease. I need time, she finally said. To think, of course. Nathan reached into his coat and produced an envelope, somewhat worn from travel but sealed with her father's distinctive wax stamp. He asked me to give you this, regardless of your decision. Madeline took the letter, her fingers tracing the familiar seal. Thank you. I'll be in town for a few more days, Nathan said, rising from his chair. Take all the time you need. As he turned to leave, Madeline called after him. Will you be at the Saloon tonight? A smile touched his eyes. Would you prefer I wasn't? No, she admitted. I'd like to talk more. After my shift ends, then I'll be there. With a slight tip of his hat, Nathan departed, leaving Madeline alone with her father's letter and thoughts that swirled like leaves in a windstorm. Later that day, in the privacy of her rented room, Madeline broke the seal on her father's letter. His familiar handwriting brought tears to her eyes. My dearest Madeline, if you are reading this, then Mr. Vaughn has found you, and for that alone, I am eternally grateful. First, I must beg your forgiveness for the cruel deception that led you to believe I was dead. There are no words to adequately express my regret for the pain this caused you, or for leaving you vulnerable to Edward's manipulations. I pray that you will allow me the chance to explain everything in person, but I will understand if you cannot forgive this betrayal. Please know that everything I did, however misguided, was in an attempt to protect you. The bearer of this letter, Nathan Vaughn, is a man of exceptional character. Though his manner may seem gruff, there is no one I would trust more with your safety. If you choose to return to Boston, he will see you safely home. If not, he has instructions to provide you with funds that are rightfully yours, independent of any decision you make regarding our relationship. You are, and have always been, the greatest blessing of my life. My only wish now is for your happiness and safety, wherever you may find them. With deepest love and remorse, your father. Madeline read the letter 3 times, her father's words stirring emotions she had buried months ago. The pain of his perceived death, the subsequent betrayal by her cousin, and the terrifying flight across the country had left little room for softer feelings. Now, knowing he was alive, she felt anger mingled with relief, and an aching homesickness she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. That evening, Madeline returned to the Silver Dollar Saloon as Sarah Miller for what might be the last time. Old Jenkins noticed the change in her immediately. "You look brighter today, girl," he commented as she tied on her apron. "Whatever ailed you must have passed." "Yes," she said with a genuine smile, "I'm feeling much better." The saloon filled quickly as the dinner hour approached. Madeline worked with her usual efficiency, but her eyes frequently strayed to the door. Nathan arrived shortly after 8, taking a seat at the far end of the bar where he could observe the room. He ordered whiskey and a meal, exchanging only necessary words with her, respecting the role she still needed to play. As the evening progressed, Madeline found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. There was something compelling about Nathan Vaughn beyond his connection to her father. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence he exuded, or the contrast between his frontier ruggedness and the intelligence in his eyes. Unlike most men who frequented the saloon, he seemed completely comfortable in his own skin, requiring no liquid courage or boastful stories to establish his place in the world. "That one's been watching you all night," Martha whispered as they passed each other behind the bar. "Handsome, too." "Want me to send him on his way?" "No," Madeline replied. "He's harmless." Martha raised an eyebrow. "If you say so, just remember Jenkins don't like his barmaids getting too friendly with customers." "It's not like that," Madeline insisted, though she felt color rising to her cheeks. "Sure it ain't," Martha said with a knowing smile before sauntering away to serve another table. At midnight, as the crowd thinned, Madeline approached Nathan. "I'll be finished in half an hour," she said quietly. "There's a bench behind the general store. No one will disturb us there." Nathan nodded. "I'll wait for you." True to her word, Madeline completed her duties and bid goodnight to Jenkins. The night was cool but pleasant, with a canopy of stars stretching across the sky. She found Nathan waiting on the bench, his tall figure illuminated by moonlight. "I read my father's letter," she said, sitting beside him, "and he speaks highly of you." Nathan's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Your father is a good judge of character." "Is he?" Madeline asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "He trusted Edward Blackstone for years." "We all have blind spots when it comes to family," Nathan replied gently. The truth of his words silenced her momentarily. "Tell me about yourself," she finally said. "If I'm to trust you, I should know something about the man my father sent across the country to find me." Nathan gazed up at the stars for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I was born in Ohio, but my family moved west when I was young. My father worked the railroads until a cave-in took his life. My mother remarried a rancher, and I grew up learning to track, hunt, and survive on the frontier." "How did you become a Pinkerton agent?" "I spent some years as an Army scout, then as a marshal in Colorado Territory. The Pinkerton Agency recruited me for my tracking skills." He turned to look at her directly. "Your father hired me after I helped recover stolen bonds for a bank he did business with." "And now you've found me," Madeline said softly. "Mission accomplished. Finding you was only part of my responsibility. Ensuring your safety is the other part. Am I still in danger?" "You said Blackstone has been indicted." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Indicted, yes, but not captured. He fled Boston before the authorities could arrest him. That's another reason your father wants you to return, so he can ensure your protection." The revelation sent a chill through Madeline. "You think Blackstone might come looking for me?" "I think a man facing ruin and imprisonment has little left to lose," Nathan answered honestly. "And he struck me as the type to settle scores." Madeline wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed beneath the open sky. "All this time I thought I was free of him." "You can be," Nathan said, his voice low and determined. "But you need to make a decision, Madeline. If you stay here as Sarah Miller, you'll always be looking over your shoulder. And if I return to Boston, will I not be doing the same?" "In Boston, you'll have your father's resources and protection, and mine if you'll accept it." There was something in his voice, a personal offer beyond professional duty, that made Madeline look at him more closely. In the silvery moonlight, she could see the earnestness in his expression, and it stirred something within her that she had long thought dormant. "I need one more day," she said. "To say goodbye to this life properly?" Nathan nodded. The eastbound stage leaves the day after tomorrow. Will that give you enough time? Yes. Madeline rose from the bench. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Nathan, he corrected gently. After all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities. A smile touched her lips. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Madeline. The sound of her real name in his voice followed her all the way back to her room. The next day passed in a blur of preparations and farewells. Madeline explained to a disappointed Mr. Jenkins that she had received word that a distant relative had died, leaving her a small inheritance that required her immediate return east. The old man seemed genuinely sorry to see her go, offering her a generous final payment and making her promise to return if her plans changed. You're the best barmaid I've had in years, he grumbled, and the only one who could count the register without cheating me. Thank you for everything, Madeline said, impulsively hugging the surprised saloon owner. You gave me work when I needed it most. By evening, she had packed her meager belongings and settled accounts with her landlady. Nathan had arranged for her trunk to be loaded onto the stage in the morning, and she would work one final shift at the Silver Dollar before departing. The saloon was busier than usual that night, as if the whole town had conspired to give Sarah Miller a proper send-off. Madeline moved through her duties with a strange sense of detachment, observing the familiar faces and routines as if already remembering them from a distance. Nathan arrived at his usual time, taking his place at the bar. They exchanged only brief words, maintaining their public roles, but his presence provided an anchor amid the swirling emotions of her last night in Sweetwater Springs. As the evening progressed, an unexpected commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. 3 men entered trail-worn, dusty, and radiating the dangerous edge of those who lived outside the law. Madeline didn't recognize them, but instinct made her step back from the bar, seeking the partial cover of the storeroom doorway. Nathan's posture changed subtly, his right hand moving closer to the gun at his hip. His eyes met Madeline's briefly, conveying a silent warning. Whiskey, the leader of the newcomers demanded, slapping coins on the bar, and information. Old Jenkins served them with wary efficiency. What kind of information would that be? The man leaned forward, his voice carrying just far enough for Madeline to hear. Looking for a woman, young, pretty, from back east, might be using a different name. Madeline's blood turned to ice. She glanced at Nathan, who had already positioned himself to block the stranger's view of her. Lots of women pass through here, Jenkins replied carefully. Can't say as I remember anyone special. The man slid a folded paper across the bar. Take another look. There's money for anyone who's seen her. Jenkins unfolded what Madeline realized must be a sketch or photograph. The old man's eyes flickered toward her for just an instant before he shook his head. Nope, never seen her. The stranger reclaimed the paper, his expression darkening. Mind if we ask around? It's a free country, Jenkins said with a shrug, but my customers don't much like being bothered during their drinking time. The men spread out, showing the paper to various patrons. Madeline retreated further into the storeroom, her heart pounding. Nathan rose casually from his seat, making his way toward her while appearing to head for the washroom. Blackstone's men, he whispered when he reached her. We need to get you out of here. How? She asked, gesturing to the main room where the men were still questioning patrons. Nathan glanced around the storeroom, his gaze settling on a small window near the ceiling. Can you fit through that? I think so. Go back to your room and gather only what you can carry. I'll meet you behind the livery stable in 20 minutes. But the stage doesn't leave until morning, Madeline protested. We can't wait that long. If they're here, they know you're in Sweetwater Springs. Nathan's expression was grave. We need to leave tonight. The urgency in his voice convinced her. What about you? How will you get out? Don't worry about me, he said with a grim smile. This isn't my first escape. 20 minutes, Madeline. Don't be late. With a boost from Nathan, Madeline squeezed through the narrow window, dropping into the alley behind the saloon. The night air was cold against her flushed skin as she hurried through the shadows toward her lodgings, fear lending speed to her steps. In her room, she hastily stuffed essential items into a small satchel, a change of clothes, her father's letter, the silver locket, and the money she'd saved from her months of work. She changed from her barmaid's dress into sturdier traveling clothes, lacing up the leather boots she'd purchased for her journey west. 19 minutes after leaving Nathan, Madeline slipped into the darkness behind the livery stable. The scent of hay and horses filled the air, along with the softer smell of leather and oil. She pressed herself against the rough wooden wall, straining her eyes against the darkness. "Nathan," she whispered, fear making her voice tremble. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the stable doorway. "Here," Nathan's voice replied softly. "Are you ready?" "Yes, what's the plan?" "I've saddled 2 horses. We'll ride north tonight, then cut east toward the railroad at Clearwater Junction. We can catch the train there instead of taking the stage." "What about those men? Won't they follow us?" Nathan's expression was difficult to read in the darkness. "They might try. I left them a distraction that should keep them occupied for a while." Before Madeline could ask what kind of distraction, the distant sound of shouting erupted from the direction of the saloon, followed by what might have been a gunshot. "That's our cue," Nathan said, leading her into the stable where 2 saddled horses waited. "Do you ride?" "Yes, though it's been some time. It'll come back to you." He helped her mount a sturdy bay mare before swinging into the saddle of a larger black gelding. "Stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, don't argue." They slipped out the back of the livery and into the night, keeping to the shadows until they reached the edge of town. Once past the last buildings, Nathan urged his horse into a canter, and Madeline followed suit. The rhythm of hoofbeats and the rush of cool air against her face awakened memories of happier times, riding with her father along the Massachusetts coast. For an hour, they pushed the horses at a steady pace, following a trail that wound through scrubby hills and shallow valleys. The moon provided enough light to see by, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. Madeline's muscles protested the unaccustomed activity, but adrenaline kept her moving forward. When they reached a small creek, Nathan signaled a halt to rest the horses. Madeline dismounted gratefully, her legs trembling slightly as they took her weight. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle in the stillness. "Yes, just a bit saddle sore," she admitted, stretching her back. "How far to Clearwater Junction?" "We should reach it by midday tomorrow if we maintain a good pace." He knelt by the creek, filling a canteen. "Here, drink something." Madeline accepted the water gratefully. "Those men in the saloon, they were working for Blackstone." Nathan nodded, his expression grim. "Hired guns, most likely." "Blackstone must be desperate if he's sending men this far west." "How did they find me?" "Hard to say. Maybe they followed the same trail I did, or perhaps Blackstone has connections in the area." Nathan's eyes met hers in the moonlight. "What matters is that we stay ahead of them." "And the distraction you mentioned?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Let's just say I suggested to one of the local cowboys that those strangers had insulted his lady friend. The ensuing brawl should keep them occupied long enough for us to get a good head start." Despite the danger of their situation, Madeline found herself smiling, resourceful. "In my line of work, you learn to improvise." Nathan checked the horses, adjusting a saddle strap. "We should move on. Can you continue?" "Yes," Madeline said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Vaughn." "I never doubted it, Miss Norwood." They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Dawn found them in rugged country, with mountains visible to the west and rolling plains stretching eastward. Nathan led them to a sheltered hollow where a small spring bubbled from rocky ground, surrounded by cottonwood trees. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he said, helping Madeline dismount. "The horses need it, and so do you." Too exhausted to argue, Madeline sank onto a fallen log while Nathan tended to the animals. He produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, along with a tin of coffee. "It's not much of a breakfast," he apologized, building a small, nearly smokeless fire to boil water. "It's perfect," she assured him, accepting the simple fare gratefully. As they ate, the rising sun cast golden light through the cottonwood leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the ground. Birds began their morning songs, and the world seemed peacefully oblivious to their flight. "Tell me more about your father," Nathan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What was he like before all this happened?" Madeline's expression softened at the memories. He was, larger than life somehow, always busy with the shipping business, but he made time for me after my mother died. He taught me to ride, to keep accounts, even to navigate by the stars. She smiled faintly. He wanted me to be independent, capable. I think it scandalized some of Boston society. He sounds like a remarkable man. He was. She corrected herself, still adjusting to the knowledge that her father lived. What was he like when you met him? After the accident, Nathan considered the question. Determined, in pain, both physical and emotional, but mostly he was a father desperate to find his daughter. He looked at her directly. He never stopped searching for you, Madeline, not for a single day. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked them away. I've been so angry, thinking he left me alone to face Edward's manipulations. But now you know he would have moved heaven and earth to protect you if he could. Nathan's voice was gentle. The guilt has been eating at him. I want to see him, Madeline admitted quietly. To understand everything that happened, you will. Nathan reached out, hesitantly covering her hand with his own. I promise. The touch was brief but comforting, and Madeline found herself wishing it had lingered. There was something about Nathan Vaughn that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't since before her world collapsed. After a few hours of rest, they continued their journey. The terrain became more challenging as they approached Clearwater Junction, with steep ravines and rocky outcroppings that slowed their progress. By mid-afternoon, they could see smoke from the settlement in the distance. We're close, Nathan said. According to the schedule, there should be an eastbound train tomorrow morning. And then Boston, Madeline murmured, her feelings about returning home still conflicted. They were descending a gentle slope toward the trail that would lead them into town when Nathan suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. His posture tensed as he scanned the terrain ahead. What is it? Madeline asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Riders. Coming from the direction of Clearwater Junction. Nathan's expression was grim as he pointed to a dust cloud visible in the distance. It could be anyone, Madeline suggested hopefully. Maybe, but his tone suggested otherwise. Let's move off the trail just to be safe. They guided their horses into a stand of pines that offered concealment. From this vantage point, they could observe the approaching riders without being seen. As the group drew nearer, Madeline's hope faded. There were 4 men, riding hard, and even from a distance, she recognized the leader as one of the strangers from the saloon. How did they get ahead of us? She whispered. They must have ridden through the night and taken a more direct route, Nathan replied, his voice tight. Probably hired fresh horses in Sweetwater Springs. What do we do now? Nathan studied the terrain, considering their options. Clearwater Junction is out. They'll have men watching for us there. His gaze shifted to the mountains to the west. There's a mining settlement 2 days' ride from here, Silver Creek. It's small, but there's a telegraph office. We can send word to your father from there. The prospect of 2 more days on horseback made Madeline's already sore muscles protest, but she nodded firmly. Lead the way. They waited until the riders had passed, then backtracked up the slope before turning westward toward the mountains. The path became increasingly rugged, winding through pine forests and across rocky streams. By nightfall, they had climbed high enough to look back over the plains they'd left behind, the lights of Clearwater Junction twinkling in the distance. Nathan found them shelter in a small cave set into a hillside, protected from the wind and hidden from view by a stand of aspens. The night air was colder at this elevation, and Madeline shivered as she helped gather wood for a fire. Will it be safe to light a fire? She asked, remembering the men pursuing them. We're high enough that the light won't be visible from below, Nathan assured her, and we both need the warmth. Once the fire was burning steadily, Nathan produced more provisions from his saddlebags: dried meat, hard biscuits, and to Madeline's surprise, a small packet of tea. I noticed you prefer tea to coffee, he explained at her questioning look. I picked some up in Sweetwater Springs before. Well, before our hasty departure. The thoughtful gesture touched her deeply. Thank you, she said, accepting the steaming tin cup he offered, for everything. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the crackling fire casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Despite the danger they faced, Madeline found herself feeling strangely at peace in this moment, with this man who had quite literally chased her across the country to bring her home. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured after a while. Nathan looked up from tending the fire. "Of course." "In all your travels, all your assignments, have you never wanted to settle somewhere, to have a home of your own?" A shadow crossed his face. "I had a home once, a small ranch in Colorado Territory." "What happened? My wife died in childbirth along with our son," he said quietly. "That was 5 years ago. Afterward, I couldn't bear to stay there, surrounded by the life we'd planned together. That's when I joined the Pinkerton agency." Madeline's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. It was a long time ago," he said, though the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. "What about you? Before all this happened, what kind of life did you imagine for yourself?" The question made her reflect on dreams long set aside. "I wanted to travel," she admitted, "to see more of the world than just Boston society. My father encouraged my independence, but even he expected that I would eventually marry well and settle into a proper life." She smiled wryly. "I don't think either of us imagined I'd end up serving whiskey in a frontier saloon." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," Nathan observed. "Sometimes for the worse, but occasionally for the better." Their eyes met across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loss and unexpected connection. For a moment, Madeline allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one awaiting her in Boston, one that included the steady presence of this man who had found her when she was lost. The moment passed when a log shifted in the fire, sending sparks upward. Nathan cleared his throat and stood. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." They arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, though the small cave meant they were still within arm's reach of each other. Madeline lay awake for some time, listening to the night sounds outside and Nathan's steady breathing nearby, wondering how her life had taken such an extraordinary turn in just 2 days. When she finally drifted to sleep, her dreams were a confused mixture of past and present: the elegant parlors of Boston, the raucous silver dollar saloon, Edward Blackstone's cold eyes, and Nathan's warm hands guiding her through darkness toward safety. Morning arrived with pale light filtering into the cave and the crisp scent of pine carried on the mountain air. Madeline woke to find Nathan already up, returning from checking on the horses tethered outside. "Storm coming," he announced, nodding toward the cave entrance where dark clouds were visible on the horizon. "We should get moving before it hits." They broke camp quickly, consuming a cold breakfast while Nathan explained their route. "We'll follow the ridge for about 10 miles, then descend through a pass that leads toward Silver Creek. If we push hard, we might make it before the storm hits." The day's journey proved more challenging than anything Madeline had experienced thus far. The mountain path was narrow and treacherous in places, requiring full concentration to navigate safely. By midday, the approaching storm had darkened the sky and a chill wind whipped through the pines. "How much further?" Madeline asked during a brief rest, trying to mask her fatigue. Nathan studied the landscape ahead. Another few hours under normal conditions, but with the storm coming. He glanced at her with concern. "Are you all right to continue?" "Yes," she insisted, straightening in the saddle. "I won't be the reason we're caught in a storm." They pressed on as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Soon, the rain turned to a steady downpour, reducing visibility and turning the trail into slick mud. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning illuminated the darkened landscape in brief, stark flashes. "There's a line shack about a mile ahead," Nathan called over the storm's roar. "Used by shepherders in the summer months, we can shelter there." The small cabin appeared like a mirage through the curtain of rain, a rough-hewn structure nestled against a cliff face, partially protected from the elements. Nathan dismounted quickly, leading both horses to a lean-to attached to one side of the cabin while Madeline made her way to the door on legs stiff from riding. The interior was Spartan, but dry: a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame covered with a straw mattress. Dust and cobwebs suggested it had been some time since anyone had used the shelter. It's not the Palmer house, Nathan said as he entered, water streaming from his hat and coat, but it'll keep us dry. It's perfect, Madeline replied sincerely, already working to clear the fireplace of debris. They worked together efficiently, Nathan splitting wood from a pile stacked along one wall while Madeline swept the floor and shook out the single blanket left by previous occupants. Soon, a fire blazed in the hearth, their wet outer garments hung on makeshift lines to dry, and the small space felt almost cozy as rain drummed on the roof. The horses are settled, Nathan reported, returning from a final check on the animals. We have enough provisions for tonight and the storm should pass by morning. Then we've been fortunate, Madeline said, pouring hot water from the kettle into cups with the last of their tea. This could have been much worse. As evening settled, the storm intensified. Wind howled around the cabin's corners, and thunder crashed overhead with enough force to rattle the single window. Despite the ferocity outside, Madeline felt a strange contentment in this temporary haven, sharing a simple meal with Nathan by firelight. You think they're still following us? She asked as they finished eating. Probably, Nathan admitted. Men like that don't give up easily when there's money involved, but this storm works in our favor. It will wash away any tracks we left. Madeline wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled despite the fire's warmth. I can't believe Edward would go to such lengths. What does he hope to gain now that his crimes have been exposed? Revenge, perhaps, Nathan suggested grimly. Or he may believe that if he can force you to marry him as planned, he can still salvage something from the situation, your inheritance, if nothing else. I would never agree to marry him, no matter what he threatened. Some men don't require agreement, Nathan said quietly, only control. The implication sent a shiver through Madeline. She had glimpsed Edward's true nature in the weeks before her flight from Boston, the cold calculation behind his previously avuncular manner, the barely restrained anger when she questioned his decisions about her father's company. The thought of being in his power again was terrifying. I won't let that happen, Nathan promised, as if reading her thoughts. Neither will your father. You're not alone anymore, Madeline. His words brought unexpected tears to her eyes. For nearly a year, she had been entirely alone, relying solely on her own resources and courage. The prospect of having allies in her struggle was overwhelming. Thank you, she whispered. Nathan moved to stoke the fire, adding another log. In the renewed glow, his profile was highlighted the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows as he concentrated on the task. Madeline found herself studying him, noting the gentleness in hands that she knew could be deadly if required. You should take the bed, he said, turning back to her. I'll make do on the floor near the fire. That seems unfair when you've done all the work of getting us here safely, she protested. I've slept in far worse conditions, he assured her with a slight smile. A wooden floor is luxury compared to some places I've rested. Recognizing that arguing would be futile, Madeline accepted the arrangement. She settled onto the narrow bed, pulling the blanket around her shoulders while Nathan arranged his bedroll near the hearth. Good night, Nathan, she said softly. Good night, Madeline. Sleep well. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. The storm continued to rage outside, and her mind refused to quiet, filled with thoughts of what awaited her in Boston, of Edward's men pursuing them, and of the man sleeping just a few feet away. Eventually, the rhythmic sound of rain and Nathan's steady breathing lulled her into slumber. She woke sometime in the darkest hours, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. The fire had burned low, casting the cabin in dim, flickering light. A particularly loud crack of thunder had apparently roused her. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she could make out Nathan's form, sitting upright by the fire, his gun across his knees. Is something wrong? She asked, her voice husky with sleep. He turned toward her, features half illuminated by the dying fire. Just being cautious, go back to sleep. Instead, Madeline rose, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders as she joined him by the hearth. You need to rest too. I will. I'm accustomed to short nights. She studied his face in the firelight, noting the lines of fatigue around his eyes. You've been watching over me since the moment you arrived in Sweetwater Springs, haven't you? Nathan added a small log to the fire before answering. It's my job. Is that all it is? The question slipped out before she could reconsider it, hanging in the air between them. His eyes met hers, the blue darkened to midnight in the dim light. No, he admitted softly, not anymore. The simple acknowledgement shifted something between them, an invisible barrier dissolving. Madeline found herself moving closer, drawn by a force as inevitable as gravity. I've been alone for so long, she whispered, afraid to trust anyone. I know. His hand rose hesitantly to brush a strand of hair from her face. You're the bravest woman I've ever met, Madeline Norwood. The touch of his fingers against her cheek sent warmth spreading through her. Without consciously deciding to do so, she leaned forward until their foreheads touched, sharing breath in the quiet intimacy of the moment. Nathan, she murmured, his name a question and an answer all at once. His response was to close the remaining distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something that made her heart race. His arms encircled her, strong and secure, as she melted against him. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I didn't come looking for this, he said quietly. Neither did I, Madeline replied, but perhaps it found us anyway. They remained by the fire until dawn, talking in low voices about their lives, their losses, and the unexpected connection that had formed between them. As the storm gradually subsided and the first gray light of morning seeped through the cabin window, Madeline realized that something fundamental had changed. The journey ahead still held dangers, but she was no longer merely fleeing from her past, she was moving toward a future that suddenly held new possibilities. By mid-morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world of glistening pine needles and puddle-strewn paths. They set out for Silver Creek, riding side by side where the trail permitted, their conversation flowing more easily than before. The mining settlement came into view by late afternoon, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a narrow valley, with the skeletal frameworks of mine entrances visible on the surrounding slopes. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the distant sound of machinery echoed against the mountainsides. Not much to look at, Nathan commented as they approached, but they have what we need: a telegraph office and relative anonymity. They rode directly to the town's single hotel, a two-story structure that had seen better days but offered clean rooms and stabling for their horses. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with a walrus mustache, eyed them curiously. Don't get many visitors this time of year, he remarked as Nathan signed the register. Especially not a lady as fine as your wife here. Madeline felt a flush rise to her cheeks at the assumption, but Nathan merely smiled. My wife appreciates the compliment, he said smoothly, completing the fiction without hesitation. We've had a difficult journey. Is there somewhere we might get a hot meal? Dining room opens at 6, the proprietor replied. Mrs. Holly's makes a decent stew on Thursdays. Once they were alone in the room, a simple space with a double bed, washstand, and small table, Madeline raised an eyebrow at Nathan. Your wife. It seemed prudent, he explained, setting down their bags. A married couple attracts less attention than a single man traveling with a woman. Besides, he added with a hint of a smile, it's not entirely a lie, is it? At least, not about how I feel. The simple statement, delivered without artifice, made Madeline's heart skip. Before she could respond, Nathan continued more seriously. I need to find the telegraph office and send word to your father. Will you be all right here alone? Yes, but be careful, she urged. Edward's men could have guessed we might come this way. I'll keep my eyes open. He hesitated, then leaned down to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Lock the door behind me. After Nathan departed, Madeline took advantage of the opportunity to wash away the dust of travel and change into her cleanest remaining clothes. The simple acts of civilized life felt like luxury after days on the trail. She was brushing her hair when a knock sounded at the door. Assuming Nathan had returned, she moved to open it, then hesitated, remembering his warning. Who is it? She called through the closed door. Maid service, madam, replied a female voice. Brought you some fresh towels. Relieved, Madeline unlocked the door and found herself staring into the barrel of a pistol. Behind it stood not a maid but a man she recognized from the Silver Dollar Saloon, his face twisted in a triumphant smirk. "Well, well," he drawled. "Miss Norwood, I presume." "Mr. Blackstone sends his regards." Madeline tried to slam the door, but the man was faster, shoving it open with enough force to send her stumbling backward. He entered quickly, followed by a second man, one of the strangers who had been asking questions in Sweetwater Springs. "Where's your Pinkerton friend?" the second man demanded, glancing around the room. "Gone," Madeline replied, backing away until she felt the edge of the bed behind her. "And he'll be back any minute." The first man laughed. "No, he won't. My associates are making sure he's delayed." "Now you're coming with us, Miss Norwood. Your cousin is very eager to see you." Fear threatened to paralyze her, but Madeline forced herself to think clearly. Nathan had taught her never to go to a second location with captors if she could avoid it. "I need my coat," she said, moving toward the chair where it lay. "It's cold outside." The men exchanged a glance, then the first one nodded. "Make it quick." As she reached for her coat, Madeline's fingers closed around the small Derringer pistol Nathan had given her for protection, concealed in the pocket. In one fluid motion, she whirled around and fired at the first man. The shot was deafening in the small room. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him backward with a howl of pain. Before she could aim at the second man, he lunged forward, knocking the weapon from her hand and grabbing her wrist in a bruising grip. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, twisting her arm behind her back. Despite the pain, Madeline fought with every ounce of strength she possessed, kicking and struggling as the man tried to drag her toward the door. She managed to slam her heel down on his instep, earning a curse and momentary loosening of his grip. "Help!" She screamed, hoping someone in the hotel would hear. "Fire! Help!" A fist connected with her jaw, sending stars exploding across her vision. Through the haze of pain, she heard the wounded man urging his companion to hurry. "Just knock her out and carry her. We need to be gone before Vaughn gets back." The second man raised his hand to strike again, but before the blow could fall, the door burst open. Nathan stood in the threshold, his expression terrible to behold. In the space of a heartbeat, he assessed the scene: Madeline struggling in the grip of one attacker, another bleeding on the floor. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Madeline could recall only fragments. Nathan moved with lethal precision, disarming the man holding her and throwing him bodily against the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. The wounded man reached for his fallen gun, but Nathan was faster, his boot pinning the man's wrist to the floor. "Madeline," Nathan said, his voice unnervingly calm despite the violence of his actions. "Are you hurt?" She touched her jaw where the blow had landed. "Not badly." "Good." His eyes never left the men as he quickly bound their wrists with leather straps from his saddlebags. "These two mentioned associates. How many more are there?" The wounded man spat on the floor. "Go to hell, Vaughn." Nathan pressed his boot more firmly on the man's injured shoulder, eliciting a howl of pain. "I asked a question." "Two more," gasped the man, watching the telegraph office. "I thought as much," Nathan said grimly. "That's why I came back instead of sending the telegram." He glanced at Madeline. "We need to leave now. Can you ride?" She nodded, already gathering their few belongings. "What about them?" "The local sheriff can deal with them." Nathan secured the men to the heavy bed frame, gagging them with strips torn from a sheet. "I'll explain the situation to the hotel owner on our way out." Within minutes, they had slipped out the back entrance of the hotel, retrieved their horses from the stable, and were riding away from Silver Creek, taking a different trail than the one they had arrived on. "Where are we going now?" Madeline asked when they had put several miles between themselves and the town. "There's a railroad stop about 30 miles northeast of here," Nathan replied. "It's little more than a water tower and a platform, but the eastbound train will stop there tomorrow afternoon. If we ride through the night, we can make it. And if Edward's men follow, they'll be looking for 2 riders. We're going to split up." At her alarmed expression, he quickly continued, "Just temporarily, there's a rancher about 5 miles ahead who owes me a favor. He'll escort you to the railroad stop while I lead our pursuers in the wrong direction." That's too dangerous, Madeline protested. What if they catch you? Nathan's expression softened slightly. They won't. This is what I do, Madeline, trust me. Though every instinct urged her to stay with him, Madeline recognized the logic of his plan. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. He reached across the space between their horses to squeeze her hand, and I promise I'll find you again. I'm getting rather good at that. The rancher, a grizzled man named Hanson who had once been saved from rustlers by Nathan, agreed to help without hesitation. He provided Madeline with a fresh horse and promised to see her safely to the railroad stop by the following afternoon. Parting from Nathan was harder than Madeline had anticipated. They shared a brief, fierce embrace before he mounted his horse. "Look for me at the station," he said, his eyes conveying more than his words. "If I'm not there when the train arrives, board it anyway. Your father will meet you in Chicago." "I'll wait for you," she insisted. Nathan smiled, touching her cheek gently. "Stubborn woman, all right, wait, but only until the train is ready to depart. Promise me?" "I promise." With a final look, he rode away, deliberately taking the most visible trail leading west away from their true destination. The journey with Hanson was uneventful but tense. The old rancher was taciturn but kind, stopping when Madeline needed rest and sharing his provisions freely. By mid-afternoon the following day, they reached the railroad stop, a lonely platform beside the tracks with a small shelter and water tower. "Train's due in about an hour," Hanson said, consulting a pocket watch. "I'll wait with you until it arrives." "Thank you," Madeline said sincerely. "And thank you for helping us." The old man nodded, a hint of a smile visible beneath his weathered features. "Any friend of Vaughn's is a friend of mine. He's a good man." "Yes," Madeline agreed softly. "He is." As the minutes ticked by, she scanned the horizon repeatedly for any sign of Nathan, her anxiety growing with each passing moment. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when Hanson suddenly straightened, his hand moving to the rifle slung across his saddle. "Rider coming," he announced, pointing to a dust cloud visible in the distance. Madeline's heart leaped, then plummeted as she realized the approaching rider was coming from the east, not the direction Nathan would be coming from. "Is it one of Blackstone's men?" Hanson squinted against the sunlight. "Can't tell yet. Best get inside the shelter, miss." Reluctantly, Madeline retreated to the small wooden structure, peering through its single window as the rider drew nearer. Hanson positioned himself between the approaching horseman and the shelter, his rifle ready but not aimed. As the rider came into clear view, Madeline gasped in recognition. It was Nathan, on a different horse than the one he'd left with, approaching from an unexpected direction. Without thinking, she burst from the shelter and ran toward him as he dismounted. "Nathan," she cried, throwing herself into his arms. "Thank God you're safe." He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair for a moment before he pulled back to look at her. "Did you encounter any trouble?" "None," she assured him. "Mr. Hanson kept me perfectly safe, but what happened to you, and why are you coming from the east?" Nathan exchanged a nod of greeting with the rancher before explaining. "I led our pursuers west for about 10 miles, then doubled back through a ravine and circled around. I borrowed a fresh horse from a mining camp and took the long way here, approaching from the direction they'd least expect." "Did it work? Are they still following your false trail?" "Last I saw, they were heading into the mountains, convinced we were making for the next territory." Nathan smiled grimly. "They'll figure it out eventually, but by then we'll be on the train to Chicago." As if summoned by his words, a distant whistle sounded, announcing the approach of the eastbound train. Hanson took his leave, refusing Nathan's offer of payment with a gruff wave. "Just name your firstborn after me," the old rancher called over his shoulder as he rode away, causing Madeline to blush furiously. The train arrived in a cloud of steam and coal smoke, its brakes screeching as it slowed for the water stop. Only a handful of passengers disembarked, mostly miners, and a few drummers with sample cases. Nathan purchased 2 tickets to Chicago from the conductor, and they boarded quickly, finding seats in a car that was only half full. As the train pulled away from the platform, gathering speed for its journey east, Madeline felt the tension of the past days beginning to ease. She leaned against Nathan's shoulder, watching the landscape roll by through the window. "We made it," she said softly. Nathan's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her closer. "We're not home yet, but yes, the worst is behind us. Home." The word conjured conflicting emotions, images of Boston's familiar streets alongside memories of terror and betrayal. Madeline realized that her conception of home had changed irrevocably during her months in the West. "What happens when we reach Chicago?" she asked. "Your father will meet us there. He's been staying with business associates away from Blackstone's influence." Nathan's voice held a note of uncertainty he rarely displayed. "After that, I suppose you'll return to Boston together." "And you?" Madeline turned to look at him directly. "Where will you go?" "That depends," he said carefully, "on several things. Such as whether the Pinkerton agency has another assignment waiting, and whether—" He hesitated, then continued more softly, "whether there might be reasons for me to visit Boston in the future." Madeline's heart quickened at the implication. "I think," she said deliberately, "that there would be at least one very good reason for such visits." The smile that lit his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Nathan took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Then I'll make sure to include Boston in my travel plans." The remainder of the journey passed in a blend of anticipation and contentment. They spoke of many things Nathan's life before he became a Pinkerton agent, Madeline's dreams that had been deferred but not abandoned, and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. They also spent comfortable hours in silence, simply existing in each other's company as the train carried them steadily eastward. In Chicago, they were met at the station by a distinguished-looking gentleman with silver-streaked dark hair and familiar green eyes, Michael Norwood, alive and whole, despite the elaborate fiction that had been created around his death. The reunion between father and daughter was emotional and complex. There were tears, embraces, and eventually, as they settled in a private parlor at the Palmer House Hotel, difficult conversations about the past year and the deceptions that had separated them. "I will spend the rest of my life making this right," Michael promised, holding his daughter's hands in his own. "Whatever you need, whatever you want, it's yours." "I understand why you did what you did," Madeline said, her initial anger softened by the clear remorse in her father's eyes. "But I need time to process everything." "Of course." Michael turned to Nathan, who had remained respectfully quiet during their reunion. "Mr. Vaughn, I can never adequately express my gratitude for bringing my daughter safely home." "It was my honor, sir," Nathan replied sincerely. "Your daughter is the most courageous person I've ever met. You should be very proud." "I am," Michael said, looking at Madeline with obvious admiration, "more than words can express." Later that evening, after her father had retired to his room, Madeline and Nathan walked through the hotel's elegant garden courtyard, finding a quiet bench beneath a flowering arbor. "My father has invited you to accompany us to Boston," Madeline said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Will you come?" Nathan considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Would you like me to?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, "very much." "Then I will." He took her hand, raising it to his lips. "But I should warn you I'm not well suited to Boston society. I'm more comfortable on horseback than in drawing rooms." Madeline smiled, remembering the saloon girl who had served whiskey to cowboys and miners. "Neither am I anymore. Perhaps we can be uncomfortable together." The following weeks brought significant changes. In Boston, Edward Blackstone was finally apprehended trying to flee the country. The evidence Michael Norwood had gathered, combined with testimony from Blackstone's former associates, ensured he would spend many years in prison for his crimes. Norwood Shipping began to recover under Michael's renewed leadership, though he now shared management responsibilities with Madeline, who had discovered during her time away that she possessed both aptitude and interest in the business. Nathan remained in Boston longer than anyone expected, ostensibly assisting with security concerns as the Blackstone case proceeded through the courts. In reality, he and Madeline were inseparable, their relationship deepening despite raised eyebrows among Boston's elite. 3 months after their return to Boston, Nathan found Madeline in her father's study reviewing shipping manifests. She looked up with a smile as he entered, but her expression quickly turned to concern when she saw his serious face. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting aside her papers. "I received a telegram from the Pinkerton office this morning," he said, holding up the yellow paper. "They've offered me a new assignment." Madeline's heart sank. "Where?" "San Francisco. They're establishing a new office there and want me to help train agents familiar with Western territories." He sat on the edge of her desk. "It would mean leaving Boston for at least 6 months." "I see." Madeline struggled to keep disappointment from her voice. "When would you need to leave?" "That depends," Nathan said, setting the telegram aside. "On what?" "On whether you might consider accompanying me." His blue eyes held her steadily. "Not as Madeline Norwood or Sarah Miller or any other name you might choose to use, but as Madeline Vaughn." For a moment, Madeline couldn't speak, certain she had misunderstood. "Are you?" Nathan slid from the desk to one knee before her, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Madeline. I think I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you in that saloon, pretending to be someone else but unable to hide your true self. I want to build a life with you in Boston, in San Francisco, or anywhere else our adventures might take us." He smiled up at her, hope and vulnerability mingled in his expression. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy sprang to Madeline's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Nathan rose, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that made her forget they were in her father's study in the middle of the afternoon. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Your father might object to you moving so far away," he said. Madeline laughed softly. "My father spent the last year trying to give me back my freedom. I don't think he'll stand in the way of my happiness now." She was right. Michael Norwood, when informed of their engagement, offered his immediate blessing, along with a wedding gift that left them both speechless, a partial ownership stake in a new shipping line being established between Boston and San Francisco. "The business needs representation on both coasts," he explained with a twinkle in his eye. "And I need someone I trust to oversee our Western operations." They were married in the garden of the Norwood estate on a perfect autumn day, with golden leaves drifting down around them as they spoke their vows. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by Michael, Nathan's few friends from his Pinkerton days, and, to everyone's surprise, old Jenkins and Martha from the Silver Dollar Saloon, who had traveled all the way from Wyoming territory for the occasion. "Couldn't miss seeing our Sarah become a proper lady again," Jenkins said gruffly, uncomfortable in his Sunday suit but beaming with pride. After the wedding, Nathan and Madeline embarked for San Francisco, where they established a home overlooking the bay. Nathan divided his time between the Pinkerton office and the shipping business, while Madeline found herself drawn to charitable work with young women who had come west seeking new beginnings, but found hardship instead. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she would say when asked about her passion for the cause. "Sometimes, all it takes is one person who believes in you." 5 years after their wedding, Madeline stood on the porch of their home, watching Nathan teach their 4-year-old son, Michael, to ride his pony in the paddock. Their 2-year-old daughter, Hannah, played at her feet with wooden blocks, occasionally looking up to clap when her brother completed a circuit of the enclosure. As the sun began to set over the Pacific, Nathan lifted Michael from the pony and walked toward the house, the boy chattering excitedly about his riding lesson. Seeing Madeline watching them, Nathan's face broke into the smile that still made her heart race after all these years. "Mama." Michael called, running ahead. "Papa says I'm a natural horseman just like him." "I can see that," Madeline agreed, ruffling her son's hair. "You'll be out fighting your father soon." Nathan reached the porch, bending to scoop up Hannah, who squealed with delight as he tossed her gently into the air. "Not likely," he said to Michael with a wink. "I've got a few tricks left to teach you." As they gathered their children and moved inside for dinner, Madeline felt a wave of contentment wash over her. From the frightened young woman who had fled Boston under cover of darkness to the confident wife and mother she had become, her journey had been extraordinary, and it had all begun the moment a blue-eyed stranger in a dusty saloon had called her by her real name and held her close. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked later that evening as they sat together on the porch, watching stars emerge over the bay. Madeline smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I was thinking about names," she said, "and how the right person speaking your true name can change everything." Nathan pressed a kiss to her temple. "Madeline Vaughn," he murmured. "It still sounds like music to me." "As it should," she replied, turning to meet his lips with her own. "It's the name I was always meant to have."